Welcome to the Women Trailblazers podcast from the UWSP Women's Center for Equity, Development, and Leadership. Here at UW-Stevens Point, we believe that women thrive when they participate in leadership at all levels of decision-making. This podcast is dedicating to centering women and showcasing the incredible ways we lead together.
Each episode, we explore stories of resilience, innovation, and empowerment. Our third series is part of UWSP's Point Out Loud pilot, and we're thrilled to have you join us. Today, we kick off our journey with the empowering words of Malala. Do not wait for something else to come and speak for you. It's you who can change the world.
We're thrilled to introduce Bobbi Kubish, a passionate educator and advocate for young engagement in natural resources. With a career spanning over 2 decades at UW-Stevens Point College of Natural Resources and a global perspective from teaching South Korea, Bobbi brings a wealth of experience into our conversation. Bobbi's story is one of resilience, mentorship, and a deep commitment to fostering connections between youth and the natural world. Today, we will be discussing Bobbi's take on relationship building, amplifying others' voices, and building confidence. Let's explore how her personal and professional experiences intertwine to cultivate futures that matter. Thank you so much for being here today, Bobbi.
You're welcome. I'm really excited to be here.
Yes, we're so excited to have you. How are you doing today?
I'm doing very well. Thank you.
Good. Awesome.
Well, how about you too?
We're doing great. We had an awesome day.
It's always good to be with Serena and our podcast team. You can't. Nobody hears the voice of Mac and Lee, but they're with us the whole time.
They are. We have a great team going on here. So I would love to start if you could just give us a little career recap and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. So I actually was a student at UW-Stevens Point years ago. Honestly, I transferred there from UW-La Crosse after I discovered the Natural Resources program. So what I decided to do was, give it a shot. And I always loved to be outdoors. So I started with, at the time, it was called land use planning. And I minored in soil science, but I also really love political science, so I double majored in poli-sci. From there, I earned my degree, and I went off to work my first job with UW-Madison Soil and Forage Analysis Laboratory. And that laboratory was actually stationed in Marshfield, Wisconsin. So I worked there for several years, and my entry into that job was an internship through UWSP, so I highly recommend internships. I think they're very beneficial for students. After I was there for a few years, I had decided I maybe wanted to go back to school for my master's degree, and I wanted to stay locally. I am kind of a local gal. I grew up in Nakusa, and I just kind of put my hat in the ring for a master's degree project that I saw at UW-Stevens Point. And it was actually through the forestry program. And in the meantime, I had heard about a different one through the environmental education program. So I ended up taking that one, and I earned my master's in environmental ed and interpretation. And my project was creating the first online course for UW-Stevens Point, and it was in biodiversity and conservation biology. And it was actually funded through the World Wildlife Fund. So I got to go out to Washington, D.C. and meet a bunch of the folks from World Wildlife Fund. And it was just really a great experience all around. My advisor, Randy Champeau, was an environmental ed faculty. He's now retired. But he also directed what is called the Wisconsin Center for Environmental Ed. So from there, I went into a position through the Wisconsin Center for Environmental Ed with their K-12 energy education program. So that is a teacher education program. And I worked with that for many years. And then at the time, I kind of took off and I did sea turtle stuff for a while. My parents weren't very happy about that, but I was like, Mom and Dad, I got to get out of Wisconsin. I just have to get out of here. And so I quit a full-time job. They were not happy, but I went and studied, just did a sea turtle gig on the Gulf of Mexico for a while. And then I went to Alaska for a while and did my thing. And I eventually came back, and I forget the order, but at one point I taught environmental compliance in South Korea. My husband was stationed there in the military.
Wow.
And then I also was interim director of the Central Wisconsin Environmental Station, which, and prior to that, I was program manager. And then I also just ended up, I had many hats in the College of Natural Resources, which I love because I learned so many different facets of it. But in the end, towards the end, last year I left UWSP, but I was the coordinator of the College of Natural Resources Student Success Center. So teaching, not only advising students, but teaching them about all those career fields out there.
Yes.
Maybe that was a long story. I apologize if that got long, but
No, that
a
was
lot of
great.
different avenues there.
I'm thinking you were just awake constantly for 23 years. Is that how it worked?
It's been, it's just been fun. And I think I really loved being a part of UWSP and the College of Natural Resources. It really is where, again, the whole natural resources agricultural world is really where my heart is. And I enjoyed every job that I did there. And I was able to work with the students, throughout it all. And the students are really what, Lynn, that working with the students is what makes it worth it every day, right? So
100%.
no matter what you're doing.
That's right. And one of the things I noticed, you and Serena are in a rare group. You are both double alums of UWSP. So Serena's working on her master's here.
Yeah.
I don't meet a lot of people that are double alums. That's pretty cool.
We're pretty cool people around here.
We are cool people. We are cool people, Serena.
Yeah, I love that. That's so cool. So you mentioned a couple of things. You mentioned your internship and your Master of Science. And I'm curious if you can share a little bit for our UWSP listeners, how did your various roles on campus at Stevens Point shaped your career and prepared you for where you are today?
Yeah. So a year ago, October timeframe, I just happened to be looking for various jobs. And honestly, it wasn't for me. It was for one of my sons who has had some medical issues. I'll leave it at that. And we had to find like a specific job. And this position popped up, which is the Director of Educational Programming at the newer Food and Farm Exploration Center just here in Plover, Wisconsin. So as it popped up, I'm like, oh, this looks interesting. I'm going to read through it. And I've never read a job description where I could check every single box. And those boxes were outreach education to schools. So that was my K through 12 energy education type program and teacher trainings. It was field trips, which was Central Wisconsin Environmental Station. It was career development, which was the College of Natural Resources Student Success Center. It was grant writing, which I've done that through the university, all sorts of things. So, on a whim, I threw my hat in the ring, and the rest is history. So a couple weeks later, I was offered the position, and it was, I cried. I cried for 2 weeks straight. But it's been really good to see colleagues over here too, and trying to develop some partnerships. So
yeah. Well, we cried over here too. I mean, our units don't interact much, but you're a legend on this campus. And, and I don't say that lightly. It really so for me to know your name as well as I have over the 14 years I've been here, because you wore those hats, people would say, oh, well, Bobbi Kubish is doing this. Or if I'd have a question in this area, well, Bobbi Kubish did that. And so, wow. Okay. So I heard you
thank you for saying that.
Yeah, of course. Wow. I heard you tell this story, though, that had this red thread of education through it, right? So you talked about being educated as a student, and you talked about being a leader on campus in so many different spaces. So an educational leader, and now you've taken that educational leadership into another nonprofit organization. What's it like for you to be a woman in all those educational spaces?
That's a really interesting question because, oftentimes when you think of traditional pre-K through 12, the field is often dominated by women. In the spaces I've been, it's often dominated by men. So that's a really, really interesting question. What is it like? I will say that if I could have the confidence now, that I do now in my 20s, I think I could have been a more effective educator. I will say that it's taken some time for me to navigate, to grow a little bit of thick skin, whether or not we like doing that or not. I think that we have to. I've had to prove myself in many ways. Probably in some ways do more than what a man in the same role would have to do. And I'm not saying that, I have two sons. I have a fondness for my colleagues and the people that I work for, but, you do in some ways have to build up that trust. And it's just the way that it has been for me. But now I think because I've had that experience, that I can come into a room and I can talk with clarity and confidence. And so that has helped me, over the years, having those different experiences and growing and learning from them, for sure.
I feel that in my stomach. How about you?
Absolutely. That was
Talk
powerful.
with clarity and confidence.
I love that.
So it does take, it definitely takes time. I also find it interesting, though, because you really do learn the world. I'm learning the world from a different perspective, and I'm able to insert my perspective as a woman and as a mother, too, which sometimes is neglected in a lot of these areas.
Yeah.
So again, it's bringing that perspective to the table that has been lacking. But I do feel like the table is becoming more welcoming in all areas, regardless of what you hear politically. Sometimes I do feel in some of the spaces the table is maybe not all the spaces, but some of the spaces for sure. It's becoming more welcoming.
Absolutely.
I want that. I want us all, Bobbi, I want us all to be able to say, whether we're male or female, that the table's more welcoming.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Absolutely.
You talk about feeling the need to prove yourself, and I'm really curious about that. And, being a woman navigating all of this in the field that you're in, what would you say is your biggest challenge or something you wish you would have known before you started?
I guess my advice would be to women is, if you decide to have a partner and have children and work full time, it would be to really clarify those roles, right? So that it is balanced behind the scenes. There's a lot of things to juggle. And sometimes you just have to go in another room if you're at work and let the emotions fly, or go be by someone safe. You know what I mean? That you can talk to, because it can be a lot to take on.
It can be. In my field of leadership and management, we talk about what you're talking about is the cognitive load. And we measure the cognitive load that people carry in different parts of their life, especially in the non-work parts. And so we can say evidentially in our field that the cognitive load that women carry significantly more than men do can impact their careers. So it's a career impact that's not at work.
Absolutely. And I can see, you saying that, I can see places where I made the decision. I thought about going on for a PhD, didn't do it, right? And, now I'm content with that because, I have my family and things are fine. But I do think that the sacrifices are there.
Yeah.
And I don't know if there's a way around it. I think I'm not sure of that. I think it depends on a lot of factors, right? Your spouse, the type of job you have, also, your income level, all of that. So certainly, every family is different. So
I think sometimes there is a narrative that we don't often acknowledge. There's this beautiful and hard sacrificial experience of being a woman. It's part of the larger narrative in our cultures. In all those cultures we get nested in. How did you find a good place in that storyline? Like that, to be a great woman sometimes calls on us to make sacrifices that aren't counted.
You guys are asking me really tough questions. I wasn't thinking about these types of responses. I think sometimes a person's narrative, oftentimes, it's dictated a little bit by your personality and your drive. And I do think I have a little bit of a chameleon personality. I'm a fairly adaptable person. Yeah. And I'm not saying that everybody should be adaptable. Maybe it's not right for you, right? And then you're in a different pathway. But I found that because I am, and I have a tendency to I'm also a big picture person, so I really try to read a room and see what's going on before I interject or before I make changes to something. Try to figure out the why something is done. I think I have good relationships with my colleagues because of that, and I always have. Again, I think a little bit of that is personality, but what I would say is that for anybody in any career field, you just kind of got to read the room a little bit and get to know who's in the room with you, right? And what their experiences are, and acknowledge their experiences. And, that's been an interesting side for me at the Food and Farm Exploration Center because, a lot of the growers that I'm talking to, they love being outdoors. They respect the environment. They care about clean air and water, but they don't always feel listened to. They're doing what they maybe have been instructed to do through UW or through, the seed growers, and they sometimes become, the finger point, like you're the
Yeah.
bad guy, right?
Yeah.
Like you're doing something wrong with the environment. And so it's, trying not to corner people, but really trying to understand where they are coming from and how they got to the perspective that they are now. So I really enjoy that. I think it's kind of a puzzle, figuring people out that way a little bit. And I think that's always kind of helped me a little bit.
Yeah, I love that. And, something I admired about you is, looking into your background, you can really see that passion for your family and for your hobbies. And that's something I really admire you. And so I'm wondering, how do your personal experiences, like your hobbies or your family time, how does that influence your professional approach?
The mission of the Food and Farm Exploration Center, I'm just going to say, is, to reconnect people with where their food comes from, but also to teach about sustainability, precision agriculture, how the whole system works and how, the improvements that are being made. And we do that through a variety of different audiences. So, whether it's an adult program or a teen program or a family program where you might have a mom and a toddler. So what I do is I draw on a lot of my experiences, as a mother. My team, many of them are parents. We have men and women perspective on our team who are parents. So, when we develop a program, well, we're thinking about food choices, right? So for me personally, as much as I love going down to that farmer's market, sometimes the food is just, I have to toss it by the time I actually get the time to cook fresh and healthy. So, well, how do we get rid of some of that stigma, that opening some canned food it's okay. At least by the time I use a fresh vegetable, it probably has more nutritional value than what that yellow thing, whatever that was in the refrigerator, right? So, if you're a busy parent, how do you interchange recipes, going to different types of recipes, teaching people how to store things so they last, so what are some issues that maybe parents have, to save money? Well, if I can keep these vegetables a little longer, heck, I don't have to go shopping as much. The programs, we try to design them where parents can do things with their kids, right? Like, let's go on an adventure together, even if it's on the farm kind of a thing. So I think my perspective that way has really helped. But also I would say that, being a part of the College of Natural Resources and all the career experience I have and now having teenagers, I really think about that. And what are the misunderstandings? Where are the gaps? I've always thought about that, even in College of Natural Resources. Where are the gaps? I just did a tour at the Ameda Center for Mid-State, and, they're showing the robotic machinery and the automate, but can you use this machinery in agriculture and natural resources? Yes, of course you can. This all ties together, so it's how do we build or fill in the gaps, for students that are still trying to decide where they belong. Business. I mean, business is a huge field in agriculture, right?
Absolutely.
So, giving examples so people really understand.
Yeah. So you use your personal life and your personal experiences, and you bring that's constantly informing what you do and say.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that of my colleagues that are sitting around me, right? So we're really trying to learn from each other as well.
Yeah.
So I think that's important. Having more people at the table definitely I think makes the end product better, right?
Yeah. And that's your listener, right? You're such a strong listener. So I teach brand. I teach young women and young men and actually executives on how to really live out of their brand, right? So one of the misperceptions of leadership is that there's one way to be a leader. And I think you're just an outstanding example of leadership at its best, which is that you're you're sitting down in your brand. And I can see that so clearly because you're talking about, I wear many hats over my 23 years. You're talking about this chameleon. You're talking about getting more people at the table. And your brand is coming across so clearly in terms of course you can be a chameleon because you wear those many hats and you wear them so generously for other people. So I think you're an outstanding role model for us and certainly for the professionals and the students that are listening to this podcast.
Agreed. Absolutely.
Yeah. So I guess I just
felt. I feel like I'm taking a little bit of a, like I just took one of those personality tests. So thank you. I feel really good after talking to you.
Me too. It's mutual.
I love it.
I love it.
I'm curious, so as Director of Educational Programming at the Food and Farm Exploration Center, what are some innovative educational programs or partnerships that you've helped create?
I want to just give a little history here. So one of the reasons that this facility went up was our local growers were getting so many requests for school field trips that at times it was interrupting operations, but it was also possibly becoming a safety concern, especially as these larger field trips came.
Okay.
And, it's like, okay, have we counted all the heads, because we have to turn on the equipment kind of a thing. So the original idea was to put maybe an equipment shed in a field and maybe hire someone part-time to do these types of programs. And then, I think we've all noticed the disconnect, right, between people and their food, where their food comes from. They're eating more processed foods, all of that. So as that conversation grew amongst the growers in the area, it really just took off. And that's where this facility came from. Even before I walked in the door, I was lucky because they had curriculum developers that were here that, had already designed some of the curriculum. 2 ag educators were already hired. And now I have 2 elementary specialists on staff too. And I have a cook because we have a kitchen lab here. So we have a lot of avenues for partnerships and ideas. And if anything, it's kind of like a hose is been turned on full blast and it's coming at us. So it's like, how do we slow this down a little bit? So I would just say from my experience that I brought in, because I didn't have to teach anybody how to educate. They already knew what they were doing. But they were in a formal classroom. So a lot of what I was helping them with in the beginning was tweaking that non-formal piece, and bringing non-formal education alive in a setting like this, and just working out the kinks. Like, what do we have to talk to the chaperones about? What time is the bus? Setting in bathroom breaks, all the little things. So we really, this last year, we've been working through kinks like that, and we've had, last spring alone, we had over about 6,000 kids and about 100 schools that had come through here. So the doors just open wide up. In the summer, as a team, we developed some mini camps for kids. So we tried those culinary camps, and we had a pollinator camp, and we also ran the first tractor safety course through Portage County in what I've been told years. So the families were really happy about that for their youth. And again, I was a very small. I'm doing more of the logistics, the paperwork behind the scenes. My team is doing the creative side of that. What I've really tried to do from my perspective is bring in that university connection. So we've brought in several classes from Stevens Point that have maybe come through and looked through the center, who've used the center as like museum or exhibit design, or how do we improve the environmental education or the education around the exhibits. We have a class from Midstate, which is a intro to agriculture and mechanics and irrigation class. So they come out and use our irrigation systems to talk about the latest and greatest technology in that. So trying to build those university connections more, and how can faculty use this as a teaching space, because it really is a great teaching space for that. The other thing that we're trying to do is just partner and build against some of those bridges. Portage County, there's been a little bit of friction between, the agricultural community and, the conservation community. So the way I view this place is we're Switzerland. We're here to be neutral and we're here to educate about what's going on. And so, for example, we have, and one thing I will just step back and say about our facility is that we focus on vegetable and fruit production.
Yeah.
So that's really what we're trying to highlight is what's growing in Wisconsin and all the occupations and around that profession. So one of the things that we're doing is, I've been reaching out with my natural resources colleagues. So, for example, we're partnering with UW Extension Lakes to have a field trip here to showcase production agriculture. So, the larger scale farms that might be using some of the equipment, but what is happening in that world of precision agriculture that is contributing to sustainability, like all the different avenues. And so that young professionals can learn that. And also they can use language and learn how to speak to growers that might be a little bit older, right?
Yeah.
And how to develop those bridges so that relationships can be built. So that area I'm really excited about. We have kind of an evening career fair event that somewhat planning right now with the soil science discipline, having the national soil judging students coming here. We have soil pits dug that can be practiced with. So a lot of different avenues within natural resources. And it's been fun to see those conservationists come here and people shaking hands. And I'm really hoping that this place can blossom into a center for relationship building.
Whew. All right, listeners, you did not get to see what was happening while Bobbi was talking. I have to paint that picture for you because she had her hands in the air and she was drawing all these connection points. Bobbi is a systems thinker who brings people together and uses this amazing clarity and confidence that's developed over her career to make a difference. That's what it looks like when a woman leads well. It's pretty amazing. Thank you for that visual illustration.
You're
love
welcome.
that. A lot of great things going on here. That's amazing. Bobbi, when you think about women in our role in society, what gives you the most hope?
Oh my gosh. Again, this is coming from a mother that has two young men as I have two sons. So I do believe that women are change makers. And
I love that.
I don't think that multitasking is necessarily good, right? You need to sit and get a job done, right? Instead of doing too many things, which sometimes I do get caught up in that, I will admit. But I think that the perspective that women bring is really important to any conversation that is out there. And because of that, I think, any program, any industry can be better, right? With that perspective. And for better or for worse, we want to see things get done. And I'll say that that's a good thing, but it's a curse because we also need to learn how to say no. Yeah. Right. And we need to say I'm at capacity here.
Yeah. Change makers who don't have to change everything.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, so you've alluded to something that we don't have a lot of time, but I want to acknowledge it because I think I'm hearing it. You talked early on in the podcast. I heard you say something that connected to this, and then you said it again. So when you answered this question about hope for women, you said, I have two sons. And, this is something I wrestle with, and I'd love your counsel on it. How do I be an advocate for women without being a disadvocate for men, right? So often we get caught in this duality of if I'm promoting women, then that means I'm saying something bad about men, and I'm not.
I've gotten caught in that trap too, and I think sometimes my boys have noticed it. How I'm trying to navigate this is to remind myself that the young boys didn't play a part in the system that we have in place. They have to learn it and they have to understand their role in it and what their role will be, but offering them the same opportunities, right? Developing the same types of program, because now, we're learning that boys are falling behind, so developing the same types of programs for boys, making career development just as exciting for them, as it is for young women, I think is really important. but again, at the same time, knowing that, it's okay to expose them to traditional roles, right? And other,
Yes.
but I mean, it's exciting for them to know that, I really do, maybe a young man wants to be a nurse. I really would love to do this, or be an elementary teacher, or some of the, and I think, just as exciting, a young woman could be a mechanic, what have, but, remembering that for the young ones, it goes both ways, and the little men didn't have any they didn't have any say in the system, so providing those opportunities.
The little men didn't have any say in this system. Okay, I'm gonna be holding that. That's really great.
Yeah. And I think for me, like, I've heard that from my boys. It's just like, well, I don't know why I'm being blamed for that, right? And I think that some of that might be what's causing some of the divide. So I've tried to be a little bit gentler, right? Right. While lifting up women, right? Also remembering, that, hey, everybody's voices is important.
Everybody's voices matter. I love that. That's a great saying. I love that. And before we wrap up here, we have one more question for you. What's the one thing you'd like to ask everyone listening to this podcast to do to further unleash women?
I think it's a little bit of what I just talked about, right? Like don't be afraid to expose them to something that isn't traditionally a female dominated toy, whatever, because it opens their minds in so many ways. And I remember I was kind of always that kid. First of all, I'm named Bobbi, so a lot of people will just think I'm a man walking in the room. So that's actually given me a little bit of an advantage over the years. But I was the girl, on the baseball team, and I've enjoyed. I was the kid up in the tree. I did more of the kind of what you'd call the boy things, but at the same time, I ended, I'm an educator. I'm in more of a female dominant role. So you just never know the paths that people are going to take, and cheering them on, cheering them on, no matter what that is, and giving them a voice at the table, amplifying their voice. If you notice that someone is talking over them, kind of a thing.
I love that. So amplifying their voice is your direct answer. I do want to say that I did write down something that you said earlier, and I think it's your indirect answer, right? So I think that your life has been a model for how to unleash women. And so I want to ask all the listeners here, especially the younger ones, but all of us. And here's a question that Bobbi asked my heart. What's your turtle gig? Right? When do you say, I'm going to blow it up and try something new? I'm going to pivot. That is so amazing. And I think those pivots, right? And you've talked about gender pivots. You've talked about lots of different ways to pivot. But I think, Bobbi, you're a model for unleashing through being bold, being confident, and making these courageous different choices.
Well, thank you for that. I mean, it's been hard, but I really have grown from that, and I don't know. It's like when one door closes, another one opens, or maybe like 5 windows open and you don't know which one to take. It's really more what it's like as you develop more experiences and more confidence. I kind of feel, it can be hard getting out of the gate from college, right? Like, I had many sad students coming in, I got turned down for this job. I got turned down for this job, but don't give up. Keep putting those resumes out there. Do things that'll help to fill in the gaps, volunteer, do whatever, do a little something that's going to keep you going and getting some experiences that you can put on that resume, and something will come around. It will come around. It always does. So
I love that. What great pieces of advice today. Thank you so much. That was beautiful. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here today and spending your time with us today. We super appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. It's been lots of fun.
It has.
Yes, it has. That's a wrap on this episode of Series 3, Episode 3. A big thank you to Bobbi Kubish for sharing her inspiring journey and the transformative work she's leading with the Food and Farm Exploration Center. If you loved this episode, subscribe and share it to spread the message of empowering future leaders in natural resources and beyond.
Wow, what a series this has been. Serena and I, we both locate ourselves within the Century School of Business and Economics. We are focused on the marketplace and the workplace. And in this series, we stepped way outside our comfort zone and we learned so much. I can't tell you how many times Serena and I kept looking at each other, kind of shrugging our shoulders with our eyes sparkling at the same exact time. Some of my favorite terms were Cheryl introduced us to the notion of charismatic megafauna. Right? And that was just, I'm going to be living with that word forever. And Bobbi, who you just heard from, she said that she wants to see everybody creating a more welcoming table. I want to sit at that table with her and with all of you. And then going back to Abby was so vulnerable and present and really talked about how UWSP is at the heart of her education and of her network and how much mentoring meant to her. This series, grounded in the College of Natural Resources, has opened both of our eyes.
Thank you for joining us on the Women Trailblazers podcast. We hope these conversations inspire you to take action in your own life and community.
Remember, Brené Brown said, courage starts with showing up and letting ourselves be seen.
Stay tuned for our next episode where we'll continue to uplift the voices and stories of women trailblazers.
Until then, keep leading, keep thriving, and keep making a difference.